You put all of your life savings into a restaurant. That's how you lose your life. Trust me, I've been there. I'm speaking from experience.
John Tesar is a Michelin star. He built Knife into a steakhouse brand across multiple states, and Bourdain called him the most talented cook he ever worked with.
People are paying $110 a square foot, $500,000, $1 million rent for restaurants. It's not sustainable. I don't even know how it's happening, and they're all half empty because the P&L and the guesstimates are the truth. If I have 50 seats, I'm going to charge X, Y, and Z. You're going to get this on a certain night. This is your average. That's what it is, folks. Even if we're wildly successful and that happens every night, you're not making more than that every night. It's like commodities. You have to know the floor and the ceiling.
What's the one thing about building a restaurant brand that you had to learn the hard way?
Money is geometric. Think about it. Like 10% interest on $1 is a dime. 10% interest on 10 million is what? $1 million. If you're going to go on to the next one, how do you do it? And the easiest way to do it is with somebody else helping you. So I surrender control of a lot of things, including a lot of profit. I made over $16 million for that restaurant in 9 years out of an 83-seat restaurant. So that's why Knife works. That's why Knife is a brand, and that's why Knife is scalable.
Yeah.
I'm not opening a new restaurant until we have a recession. 10 years ago, I'd be like, that's another restaurant? Let's do it. Guess what? I'd be broke next year telling you another story on a podcast about how stupid I was.
John Tesar, thank you so much for joining this show. I am honored because you are a storied legend when it comes to chefs, especially modern day chefs. I'm just going to go ahead and rattle off a couple things that are real, just to set the stage for our listeners here. Anthony Bourdain called you the single most talented cook I ever worked with. And he also wrote you into Kitchen Confidential as Jimmy Sear, a character defined as much by chaos as brilliance. And then in 2011, D Magazine put you as the most hated chef in Dallas on its cover with your face. And then 11 years later in 2022, you earned a Michelin star at Knife and Spoon in Orlando. I mean, this is like this crazy arc that is almost, truth is stranger than fiction almost, right? Like you've got such a wealth of experience throughout this industry. And because of that, I think you become a unique expert to dive into some more of the nitty-gritty stuff about what it really means to be a chef, right? Because we can take all those things, and those are amazing accomplishments. But I want to more ask a question in a different vein, because you've seen it all, it seems. At what point did you realize that the biggest threat to your restaurants wasn't necessarily a food critic or a bad partner or a difficult city, but it was the gap between how your food was and how you were running the business of it, and what had to change there?
I mean, early on, it was pivotal. I mean, if you look at all those things that you said about me and all those things that I've accomplished, and accomplishments are one thing, but restaurants and chefing are day to day.
Right.
That's, I like to separate. I don't think people separate them. They morph together, but let's put that aside. But when I first started out, I was undercapitalized all the time. I owned my first restaurant when I was 24 years old in the Hamptons. I bought it because the owner, lover had contracted AIDS, and it was a stigma back in the 80s. And I got a great opportunity to buy this restaurant. I was literally 24 years old. I borrowed $68,000 from my father, which was like equivalent to like my last 2 years of college. And I said to him, I'm opening a restaurant. And it was a huge success. And I ran it for 11 years. But what I learned is the quality of life, what you sacrifice in quality of life, what you sacrifice in position versus salary versus notoriety. And back then, notoriety was a little bit more important to the key of real success and branding, because there were no brands. Wolfgang Puck was just a baby putting pizzas in the oven. Larry Forgione was working at a hotel. Jonathan Waxman was going to La Varenne in France. This hadn't happened yet. I was there when it really turned. And that's what was an inspiration to a lot of chefs, is we're going to own our own restaurants now. We're American. We created this American cuisine. We watch Alice Waters. We watch what Jeremiah Tara did for Alice Waters. We come to New York and we see Larry Forgione with James Beard and Paul Prudhomme, celebrating Cajun food, because New Yorkers never knew what Cajun food or what the celebration of Louisiana was before it turned into this, three-ring circus that's happened in the last 20 years.
Sure.
No, but before that, there were real roots and culinary history to this that was part of American cuisine, the regional cuisine. And Larry, and I witnessed it a few times. I was at American Place for a meeting because I was dealing with a restaurant up the street that Larry was a consultant on. I went to lunch with literally Paul Prudhomme, James Beard, and Larry Forgio.
Wow.
I mean, talking about American cuisine, and I'm this kid fresh out of culinary school in France. I had worked at the restaurant. I hadn't bought it yet, but these are the kind of things I've been exposed to over my life, and you can see the growth of the business, and you can see that also disappearing, which to me is really sad. And I'm not saying like an old man, get off my lawn, or it's disappearing. It's just the corporate world doesn't understand what we do. And we've come out a period of cancel culture and behaviors and all these idioms and memes and things we say about the next generation or the other generation, rather than welcoming people into your restaurant, training them, introducing them to a culture, and being okay with some of them staying and some of them going, and paying them what they need and advancing their lives forward. Because you can forget about the HR shit. What's changed is people need to make a living because things are expensive.
Yeah.
So you see recently with this gnome of people not getting paid, there's no more not paying anybody because it's too expensive to cross the street. So I understand that as a business person, but that's also the difficulty in keeping people and getting people. But getting back to the original question is that the capitalization is everything. Your business sense, your rent, your insurance, your location, your relationship with your landlord, the type of tax structure where you are, right? Payroll, all that stuff is so more important than the food, sadly,
Hmm.
because it's turned to that much of a business. Commercial real estate prices are freaking through the roof. Here in Dallas, people are paying $110 a square foot, $500,000 rent for restaurants. And there's 10 new restaurants that open up every day. I closed Knife Down recently in the Highland Hotel. I'm not opening a new restaurant till we have a recession. I'm sorry. I don't want to poo-poo the economy, but
Well, yeah, it's not sustainable. That growth is not sustainable.
it's sustainable. I don't even know how it's happening now. They're all half empty.
Yeah.
And God knows the real estate deals they made in the beginning with TI money and free rent. And then when that all hits together, right, in a period, you see it now because what's happening in the businesses that were here 5 to 10 years ago, they're closing. All the locals, all the small business restaurants are closing because we can't afford the new rents.
Mm.
Or we know better. We may have success, we may have branding, we may have customers that want us, but I can't do that to my family. I can't go take the risk of opening a 10,000 square foot restaurant and paying $1 million in rent, right? And having it fail after all of these years of struggle and the notoriety and success I've worked very hard for. That's something I've learned. Where 10 years ago I'd be like, yeah, oh, that's another restaurant. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And guess what? I'd be broke next year telling you another story on a podcast, about
You,
how stupid I was.
I think that's really helpful, and I think it's really good to hear the vulnerability there because just to give you some context, the folks that listen to this show are anything from small restaurant operators to even chefs opening their first location to people who work for the big mega multi-thousand location corporations and vendors that service all of the in between. Right? It's a little bit of the breadth of the industry. But one of the things I've heard from several people that I've interviewed, especially folks kind of like yourself, where they're chefs with some notoriety who have had that experience of starting their first location, expanding, it just keeps coming back to like the money, if you will. And you've said that chefs who can't handle the money side don't really survive long, no matter how talented they are. And you've talked publicly about the geometry of money and understanding how restaurant financials actually work. And it seemed like you were starting to go down that route. And I want to pull that thread a little bit more for the folks who are listening, who are honestly probably struggling and looking at you, being like, "How can I be like John? How can I be successful like him?" Which I know you kind of say, "Whoa, well, get ready for some hard knocks." But really, people are probably seeing that
No, you're right. You're right. I've been blessed.
for the first time. What does that geometry look like, right? Like, what are two or three financial ratios that you would tell them they need to pay attention to be successful?
Yeah, first and foremost, I do not want to downplay all the blessings that I've had and where I am
Yeah,
because, my life could be in a totally different place as a chef, and I'm in a great place. And I give thanks to all those who, believe in me, inspire me, and help me get through all of this nonsense because it's a team. That's what you first learn is a team. But as we were talking about money,
yeah.
right? So the paper doesn't lie. This is what people forget, and it's amazing. I think it's a disease out of the '80s, what I call it. We discuss it all the time among friends, investors, people in the restaurant. It's like people would open restaurants and never even think about what it would cost. It's like buying a boat, right? You love the boat. Hey, I got a good price on that boat, but guess what? You got to dock that boat, you got to fuel that boat, you got to maintain that boat, you got to take care of all that stuff, right?
And then find time to use it.
Oh yeah, and then still, make sure you know how to drive that boat because you could run in the ground or get stuck in a storm and sink that boat really quickly. And
Yeah.
then I don't know about you, but if you sink a boat in this business, it's hard to get another boat really quickly. Like rich people can replace boats, but failure in the restaurant business at a certain level is the kiss of death,
Mhm.
especially when you're on a roll, which is why I don't want to open another restaurant until it's going to be financially feasible for my family and the people that work for me without stressing the shit out of us. But money is geometric. Think about it. Like 10% interest on a dollar is a dime, right?
Yeah.
10% interest on 10 million is what, right? $1 million.
$1 million,
So
yeah.
that's where, to me, it's geometric. So when you involve yourself with partners, it's like, I'm not a man of means. I've always had to borrow money. I've always had to be the benefit, the patron of the arts kind of guy, the racehorse where, he may have issues, but he can cook his brains out, going back to that Jimmy Sear stuff. I've lived through all those lanes of maturity in my own life, but never lost my talent and never have people really said I'm a bad cook. They've only said like really great things about my cooking. So I've used that as confidence despite all of my shortcomings to help me reinvent it. But the one thing you can't reinvent money in this business. You lose somebody's money, they're not your friend anymore,
Yeah.
right? Or
Yeah.
if they are, they're very good friends, but they're not giving you any more. Or if you're taking your family's money, and you're doing it at a hobby, which also didn't help the restaurant business for a while when we had this molecular, hipster revolution in this country of 60, 50 seat restaurants where all these artists
Yeah, they have, like, some bubble dish, and you pop it, and the
bubble dish, yeah, and but they could afford to do it because their daddy gave them a $500,000 because instead of going to college, fine. I mean, I don't begrudge all of this. I've had to live through this. I'm not judging it. I'm not even like coloring it in. I'm just kind of recanting the periods that I've had to live through, and it's all relative to the money because once you start throwing money into the business, right, that blossoms, and then it's capitalism. People start sniffing that shit like it's a perfume. Oh, I can make money here, right? And then once the real estate people decided to say, "Hey, we can develop buildings and shopping malls and places in these remote neighborhoods that we can gentrify and get in on or tax breaks and everything, but we got to bring people there."
Mhm.
So they started doing big deals with big retailers, name chefs, California Pizza Kitchen in a mall. All that. That's how all that changed. And then it became place and destination, supply and demand. We live in America. This is capitalism. You got to take off your soft shoes. And when you're dealing with getting a restaurant, dealing with a landlord, dealing with investors, you have to look at hard, cold reality. And the P&L and the guesstimates are the truth, right? If I have 50 seats, I'm going to charge X, Y, and Z. You're going to get this on a certain night. This is your average. That's what it is, folks. Like, even if we're wildly successful and that happens every night, you're not making more than that every night.
Right, there's a ceiling, right?
There's a ceiling, and you have to know the floor. It's like commodities. You have to know the floor and the ceiling.
Mhm.
And you always want to go into things positive and think you can do it, but shit happens, man. I'm telling you, I had a great restaurant in New York City, 13 Barrow Street, hit the out of the park, like your dream come true. My first restaurant in New York City, I secure it with $10,000. I get 3 Wall Street friends to put up another 300 grand, and we hit this thing out of the park. It was at New York Magazine. Gail Green loved it. Everybody ate there, celebrities, 50 seats, right? I never made more than $60,000. Probably one of the biggest successes of my life, right? I'll give you the convex of the lens. If you're on television, right? People think if you're on television, you're making a lot of money because that's American culture, right? Yeah, if I'm Guy Fieri and Bobby Flay and I have lifetime contracts and I've worked my ass off and I'm a personality and I'm making that kind of money, yeah, there's money in food television, right?
Yeah.
But if I'm a guest judge or I'm a contestant or even a contract player, I say you're making 250 max salary, and you're giving money to a manager, an
Yep.
agent, and the government, and you don't have a restaurant for the most part, right?
You're keeping 30% of that money if you're lucky.
And if that's your career for the next 10 years, or if you do have a restaurant and that works for you, I'm not, again, I'm not judging.
Yeah.
I'm just saying how topsy turvy this becomes and how out of balance and why we're in the state we're in because celebrity, I think, is dying because everybody's branded, everyone's expanded. The whole country is a mall. Every chef is a celebrity, right? You see a picture of you don't even know who they are anymore,
Yeah.
right? And then you're fighting for it. And then we live in this existence of awards, pray tell, where I believe they're all predicated on baiting the next generation, right? Because they need money to survive, whether it be Michelin, James Beard, or anybody, right? Even your local newspaper. They need someone to pay them in order to give their opinion to you, right?
Mhm.
So put two and two together how that works in the big picture.
It's the whole follow the money thing.
It is. It's the whole world is follow the money, right?
Yeah. And so I think there's a how do you because like, a restaurateur has to be real with the business, right? So they can survive.
Realities as a restaurateur, it's right there in your face.
How do you not lose your soul and the desire and joy that you get from cooking because you go into this because you love to cook and love food? How do you not lose your joy alongside the business aspect of that?
That chapter ends usually because it was bad. And then your soul and your talent will tell you that's what you're meant to be.
Mhm.
And if you're not, a lot of people move on. They sell charcuterie or they sell refrigerators or, I mean, I'm not,
Yeah.
this is just, this is, again, I'm not judging. I'm not even writing a story. This is life. I have seen chefs, come and sell me caviar and cheese 5 years ago, they were the chef of a hot restaurant in Manhattan. You know, the proudest thing I am is that I'm my age and I'm still in this business and I've never done anything else and I'm paying my bills
Yeah.
and I have a quality of life and a family. But that could go away instantaneously because right now 75% of my business is licensing knife to hotels. So I have these grandiose restaurants and I have these beautiful locations, Michelin stars, right? You think that's gonna last forever? No way, because I don't control that. If I controlled it, it would last forever. But just it may last another 5 to 10 years or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Which is glorious, but I'd like to think everybody out there just, like, stop for a moment, and even in your greatest moments as a chef, restaurateur, sommelier, anybody, right? How long is it gonna last, and what's your next step? Because that's your survival plan,
Yep.
right? And it doesn't even mean money. It's just because you have a talent. Your talent's always going to be worth something. I mean, if your personal finances, how you structure your life, I like to separate that from the restaurant business because once you combine them, that's another disaster. It's like you put all of your life savings into a restaurant, you lose it. That's how you lose your life.
Yeah.
That's what's harder to come back from. You did it to yourself too, and it hurts even more. Now, trust me, I've been there. I'm speaking from experience. Like everything I tell you about is I've done it, not because I'm making it up.
Yeah, no, I get it, and I think I'm glad you mentioned knife because I'd love to actually dive into your philosophy a little bit on that. When you opened in 2014, you had a specific manifesto, and you seem like a guy who loves a good manifesto, and I think a lot of people find manifestos very refreshing when someone's willing to just say the thing. You were talking about it being affordable, honest, chef driven, no efficiency experts. What does the word honest actually mean as a filter for running a restaurant? Like, how does it show up in real daily decisions, whether it's sourcing, menu pricing, staffing, how you even respond when a dish isn't working? Like, what does being honest actually mean to you in a restaurant?
It's exactly what you just said. It's like being brutally honest. I mean, you have to be first as a chef, I think it's useful to be your own best critic, but you have to back that up with a foundation and a body of work, which sometimes is a glitch in the system. People get all uptight and they start yelling at things, but they don't even know what the classic version of it is. And, they're bringing their own thing to their kitchen,
Mhm.
rightfully so. Right. But for me, it's like I like to have an open society these days where you do your job, you do your job, you do your job. I'm an orchestra conductor, right? I want the best horn player in my kitchen, right? I want the best man, like you have to put a team together. but you have to be honest with yourself about these things. See, that's what honesty is, the essence to any successful business.
Mhm.
So that starts with your prior question. Are you honest about the amount of money that you're willing to ask for, risk, and actually open the business that you want to? Right. So those are the honest questions that you have to ask yourself. And then you have to say, did I cut a good deal with my landlord, or am I setting myself up for failure out of ego just because I want it to be on Madison
Right.
Avenue? I know in 24 months from now, I'm going to be and I'm going to have to ask somebody for more money because this is costing a lot of money. I don't know, even know if we're going to make that much. And people have done this before and do it all the time. Hotels do it. Like, there used to be losses when I first went out to Vegas, when I worked for Rick Moonen. Those places didn't make money. And then all of a sudden it changed. If you didn't make money in Vegas, they put up a wood structure in front of your place. It was a Starbucks the next day, something that made money. No, commercial real estate is one of the, y- Wall Street is controlled by a very few small group of people. You see the way the Dow goes up, the Dow goes down. Commercial real estate is really for me, has been the driver of wealth, modern day wealth in America. I see the average guy buy a parking lot, puts up a skyscraper. He makes a ton of money himself. He did it himself, right? With financing, friends, whatever it is. That's developing wealth, right? People can do that. You can buy a house, flip a
Mhm.
house. We've even had that on smaller levels. People have learned that real estate is a good way to generate money,
Yeah.
right? Which has made it harder to open businesses because supply and demand really affects this. I happen to live in Texas right after the pandemic. A lot of people came here from
Yeah.
California for the quality of life, not knowing that it was going to be a totally different place, right? Whether they stay or leave, they're here, and their restaurants are here. The Carbones, the Lilas, the Mexicans, the thises and the that, the 10,000 square foot, $10 million build outs are here, right? That didn't exist 5 or 6 years ago here.
Mhm.
Right. So that's a truth you have to ask yourself. Can I fit into the landscape successfully while I compete against giants who don't give a shit if they lose their Dallas location a year from now because they have 12 other ones or 10 other ones, or have a deal in New York that's worth $45 million, and that's the honesty you have to have with yourself. And then there's the day-to-day honesty of, like, and especially chefs and people, because egos get in the way, and there's a healthy ego, but am I capable of what I'm really asking other people to help me with, first of all, right?
Mhm.
So I'm the big cheese, I'm the chef, right?
Yeah.
Am I gonna be absent? Am I gonna be drinking? Am I gonna be on drugs? Am I gonna bring my personal life to work? If things get rough and my finances gonna become your problem now? All that stuff. Truth, like, am I gonna do that to people? And if you are doing it to people, I'm doing it to people. How do I stop doing that stuff? All this develops around a way of just honesty in life. And I think that's how a business becomes successful. But money does cover a multitude of sins. That's the opposite side of the equation. People will throw money and not be good operators, not be good people, not be honest. Landlords will be out for themselves, with other ideas where they'll take you for 2 years and then, oh, I'm going to sell it out and build a skyscraper there. But, here, I've been going through that in a shopping mall in Plano for 5 years. Now, all of a sudden, the hockey team's coming there and everyone's like, oh, wow, beautiful. But meanwhile, for the last 5 years, my partner out there has been living there, basically, scraping nickels together to keep the brand there because we believe in the space and the location where every other location, the thing thrives. It makes millions of dollars, right? Because there's a mall 2 miles down the road that's prettier. Truth, right? My restaurant in Plano doesn't get the business that I think it deserves because there's a mall 2 miles down the road that's prettier. And there's a lot of really beautiful restaurants there that you can walk across the street to and walk around. Why would you come to my restaurant instead? Truth that I've had to tell myself, right?
Mhm.
So this goes back and forth with everything you do, from the bun to the bread service to the butter to everything. You just got to look at it and be willing to look at it for what it is, not make more of it. Because how it becomes more is when you put all of those things that you've paid attention to detail with, you signed off, and you've been honest about. That's the public will find honesty, right? I could come on here and tell you I have a James Beard, where I got a Michelin star, and I'm going to open up $10 million. It'll be all about me smoking a cigar, or to get a tomato and tell you how beautiful the insides are. All this bullshit that you see in culinary world, right?
Yeah.
But what I'm telling you is, I fear every day of my life that this could go away in an instant, whether for a plethora of reasons, even out of my control.
I think, I can sense the radical honesty you have, and what I find is that, you know, the truth will come to you no matter what. And if you've been honest with yourself, you're probably better prepared for it. If you haven't been honest with yourself, you probably are in for some hard times whenever that happens. And so I think it's really helpful to hear that honesty, especially in terms of business partnerships and being honest about that, which I wonder if that's going to come through here in my next question. You're in the middle of a genuinely significant move right now. You're separating from the Highland Hotel partnership, going fully independent, building a multi-level uptown concept with a couple different, restaurants, alongside it. And you've also, just come off a Ritz Carlton partnership with Knife and Spoon in Orlando, which is what earned you that Michelin star, right? You've
Mhm.
partnered with a lot of big different organizations and made decisions in certain areas to go independent. What are the real economic and operational differences between building inside of a luxury hotel brand versus going independent? Like, when does a hotel partnership make sense, and when does it become a ceiling for you?
Well, for me, the hotel partnerships always make sense because I can be of service. I mean, you have to look at that's honestly too, because if you're not making the money, they don't want you,
Yeah.
right? So I have a concept that fits into places where I work with Trinity, which is an investment fund out of Hawaii. They believe in me. They were introduced to me by a great friend of mine, Mark Stone, who's done everything work from Steven Starr, put Morimoto together back in the day, works with Angelo Sosa, has been around the business forever and ever. Right. So, but that was due to working hard, making relationships, associations, showing people that I could actually cook. But then when I created the knife scenario,
Mhm.
I was able to monetize it, which made all of those relationships and friendships work to my advantage. So I had been setting these things up for years, right? Because I worked in Vegas and, I watched people go from like relative obscurity to the Jumbotron. It was possible. And I saw that hotel people wanted that. But they also got tired of paying 400 grand for Tom Colecchio's name.
Yeah.
No offense. God
Yeah.
bless Tom. It's 25 years or 30 years now, Kraft. God bless you, Tom. You started it all. But that was it. Back in the day, I heard stories like to use Kraft's name, it was like, 400 grand just to get to use the name. And I'm going like, wow, maybe I could do this for like one third or half the price, and they might be interested in me in secondary markets, you know, in places where resorts were growing and things were being different. And it was just a thought I had, So this was my mother of invention, right? And I put it together, and then the knife thing was really something that came about naturally because I was a seafood guy most of my life. I grew up on the east end of Long Island. I worked with Rick Moonen, huge Eric Riparaphile, he's God to me. The Le Bernardin to me will always be the best restaurant I've ever been to
Mm.
for many reasons, not just because of fish, but mainly because of the way they teach people about seafood, and the world needs to be taught about seafood. So, I've just had all of these years of experience. So when they asked me to open a steakhouse, I went to every steakhouse, and the worst thing was the steak. And then I went to Vegas. A friend of mine, Mike Hiller, had turned me on to this thing at Carne Vino. I knew Mario before the scandal.
Yeah.
My friend was the chef there, and she let me, see how they dry aged their meat for the 240-day Reserva. What I didn't know was that they were inoculating with Mario's father's salumi mold. So
Mhm.
it was encased in this white mold, like a big salami, like totally encased. I went back to Texas. I found two natural Texas products that didn't eat corn. This was a very important part of it. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But that was a coincidence at the time. And then I went back and I saw the temperature and the moisture that Nicole had told me in Vegas about Mario's boxes, and Adam Perry Lang was involved in the process too. Um, the temperature and the humidity, and I grew this white mold naturally. And what we've learned now after all these years, to my friend Justin Brunson, who's using my mold and started the meat company out of Denver, Colorado with the mold, which is amazing, is that because it didn't eat corn, the sorghum, molasses, fermented cottonseed, the alternative uh, food sources, it was able to age past 90 days because
Yeah.
I had dinner in New York City And I love Michael White, another genius chef. And, I was asking about steak. I was eating everywhere, and one of his chefs is a friend of mine too. And I had dinner in Soho. I forget the name of the restaurant, but the steak was 90 days old. And I said, why don't you go past 90 days? And he said he was having trouble with ammoniation.
Mhm.
See, so that was the key. And Mario was having trouble with the 240s. People were sending them back in Las Vegas. But when you tasted my 240, when you tasted my meat, it was totally different because of and I stumbled upon this out of just putting shit together. So I don't know how you could be a chef the rest of your life and not come up with something so revolutionary that changes your life, changes the business. I've had everybody, you name it, barbecue guys, Jeremiah Tower, Michael Ganor. We dry aged foie gras one night, and I had the privilege. I served Jeremiah Tower, Michael Ganor, Stephen Piles, and I think Dean Ferring. I served them all like 120-day foie gras, 200-day foie gras, and I served Michael this 500-day dry aged foie gras.
What?
And God let him rest. Friend, rest in peace. But it blew his mind. And so these are moments that we've created over the years that you really can't share with everybody else, but they have great culinary value. But the meat aging changed my life and created the brand, and it just happened. Like overnight, because I was asked to open a steakhouse.
Right.
So I just, if I'm asked to put my mind to something, that honesty, those years of experience to help led me to some kind of deductive method to make shit better. And that's what being a chef really is.
Right, but then you took that and then you expanded it.
I was able to monetize it because I had other things like the supply chain from 44 farms and the relationships that I had made at the food festivals, standing next to the greatest chefs in the world and cooking just as good as they are doing, or even cooking while they're handing out something they made this afternoon. You know what I mean? I did those little things. Attention to detail in our business is everything, and it is a collective. Starts with the idea, but then there's the money, and then you have to evaluate the talent. There's all it's a chain of honesty.
Yeah.
If you can keep checking off yes, honestly, you should have a pretty decent restaurant by the time you're done.
And then did the hotel partnership just help give it like that repeatable thing that was easier to go into because it became like an easy button there, or what was that?
I call it industry envy. Industry envy. And God bless the guy who came up with it. You know, Somewhere down the line, luxury hotels decided they were going to open in cities or places and revamp their culinary programs and bring in the notable chef in the area. So Washington, D.C., you have Jose Andres.
Mhm.
San Francisco, you had Tracy Desjardins. Atlanta, you had XYZ, all these places. So I was doing a deal in Hawaii. We were going to open up a Filipino steakhouse with Sheldon from Top Chef with these gentlemen investment firm. It was a Japanese hotel. It was a quick deal. We went there. It fell apart. So they felt bad that we had wanted to do all this stuff. Sheldon was in Hawaii, couldn't come all the way to the States. They asked me if I wanted to do a steakhouse at the Ritz Carlton in Florida. Except the caveat was it was Norman's for like 20 years. So this is the guy, like I come into the culinary world at a New York restaurant scene, succeeding, but, never making any real money. I go through the whole 9/11 thing, move to Lake Tahoe, do the corporate thing. I find myself in Vegas, work my way to Texas. I replaced Dean Ferring, right? First big job in my life. Now, all of a sudden, years later, I invent this steakhouse thing and I'm moving Norman out of his old home. So to me, these culinary legends, like it's now becoming like this thing with me, like, this is happening to me.
Mhm.
Licensing thing I had was at the Highland Hotel. Thayer had owned um, uh, Beringer Harvard owned it, and it was a
Mhm.
Kimpton hotel. And they asked me to do I actually fired the Kimpton people. I went to dinner. They were going to start to tell me what to do about knife, and I was like, excuse me? I swear to God, I was at the Jewel Hotel at their brand new restaurant, and I'm sitting there with the entire board of Kimpton hotels and
Yeah.
restaurants. And they're going, so this is how we see knife, and this is how we see you fitting into it. This is what
Yeah.
the hotels will do to you if you don't have control. These deals are all different, and every hotel is different. Every brand is different. Every investment firm is different. So it's just all really different. But I had to tell them that this was now going to be a Thayer hotel, and I was gonna run my own restaurant, and I licensed it. I had a pretty the beauty of this is the first ele Yeah, it was 11 years. I had a really, really open contract where I had total control of what I was doing, and I made over $16 million for that restaurant in 9 years. So
Oh, wow.
out of a 83-seat restaurant. So that's why Knife works. That's why Knife is a brand, and that's why Knife is scalable. To see, these are other things too. It's like beyond the honesty, beyond the real estate, beyond the money, beyond the cuisine, the first restaurant, all this other stuff. If you're gonna go on to the next one, how do you do it? Right? And
Mhm.
the easiest way to do it is with somebody else helping you. So I can take my food. So I surrender control of a lot of things, including a lot of profit, right? So Knife in Orlando makes 8 or $9 million a year. I don't make the general P&L bottom off of that. I make a licensing fee because I've set that up with that. Some people want the back end. I don't want all of that. I don't want to sit there with a P&L and an accountant going like, and then they add fees and all this other stuff, and then you have arguments, and you think, you know, they pay the bills. It's their hotel. It's my friend's land. I'm lucky to be there. So
Yeah.
I shut my mouth and I freaking cook. I've got myself in a few jams outside of that, and I've seen how it's affected that life. I walk the straight and narrow because they deserve that because they've given me that opportunity. So you surrender all that. You have to be willing to surrender all that for the exposure, for the ability. I mean, how else would I have opened a Michelin star restaurant in Florida?
Because it helps you then scale, right? That's the trade-off.
But you got to work. I mean, you get the opportunities, but you got to make them work for you. I mean, this is what gets underrated too, and this is the danger of licensing too. Is you create these things, right? They're successful. Now we're 5, 6 years into it. The hotel's running it. I got a great chef de cuisine there. He wants to get the Michelin star back. I got a GM who is an incredible guy, but he's diametrically opposed to me. Like he's a very military, very hands-on guy. I roll in, I got to shave. I got to get dressed for the appropriately. That's respect because they run that place like a clock. Where I have a new Ritz Carlton and it's been much more challenging. I mean, I have all of those luxuries and a great staff and great people. Don't let me go, but it's just been a different experience. See, so each hotel, each situation, each location is going to be different, but you surrender a lot to those things. So basically, I have the chef de cuisine in the menu, but that should be enough for me to control because if I'm doing the right menu and I have the right guy watching my back, the dining room's full every night. We're making money, and nothing else matters. And it's like a Metallica song. You could tell yourself you have all the awards in the world. Nothing else matters. And when you're 75 and you can't stand up straight and you can't stand over a stove anymore, if you don't have a plan for that too, you're as well. No matter how famous you are.
That that is sage advice. I want to shift our focus a little bit, change the topic a little bit, and you've said something that I think will I imagine it will create some productive tension in front of this particular audience because a large subset of the people who also listen to this are involved in some way, shape, or form in restaurant technology. I also now work in restaurant technology, and you've said you believe restaurant like technology in general is working against us in restaurants right now, and like the current generation needs to put their screens away, get out in the world, and actually learn to cook by experiencing things, right? But at the same time, you're now running a multi-city, multi-concept operation, which has got to involve a fair share of technology platforms. How do you actually square those two ideas? And what's the right amount of technology in a restaurant? And where have you seen it hurt hospitality more than it helped?
Very helpful, but I don't see how it's gonna develop anymore. AI is not for the restaurant business unless you're in the accounting or the ordering or the supply chain side, right? So, but you're still gonna need to look at that, right? So I have AI, I have all my purchasing, all my pricing set up. That's where it'd be worthwhile. It's like, how every day can I figure out where the prices went up so I can affect the cost of my menu and micromanage my payroll and my food costs? That's where I see technology has been lacking because we've gone from everything from chef tech to, like shitty accountants or people that don't even care and never pay their bills. You know what I mean? That's been the restaurant business for most of my life. You know what I mean? And then you go to Vegas where you can order whatever you want because they got to pay the bill because they don't want to lose their gaming license. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, yeah, there's certain oases as a chef, like great cooks at Les Pinas. 75%, 70% food costs, no problem. You know what I mean? Of course you
Yeah.
can show, like that's unrealistic. But technology, I think that's as far as it goes for me. That and point of sale, you
Yeah.
know. But I find at the fine dining level, at a certain level of cuisine, I don't want someone shoving their cash register in my face for the entire table to see how much it costs, how much I'm tipping, that I have to do it right then when you're standing in front of me. So that, there's levels where technology is better, like ordering systems for fast food. I don't go to the counter. McDonald's, you don't go to the counter anymore. You're either outside of the window, you do it. Like, that to me, if there are people who are competent and we could develop some kind of hospitality and customer service, I'd rather give that job to a human being than to a machine. As long as we have a better job, or if we're going to use the machine, what's the job for the human being? Like this creating machines to replace human beings is like, people are like, it's the end of no, you just unplug the thing. And if a robot came after me, I just hit it with a baseball bat. I'm like Irish from New York City. Like, there's realism, you know what I mean? Like, until the warrior missile, like combat robots in my neighborhood. Every day here in Dallas, I pass a car with nobody driving it, but there's a guy that's got to sit in it to watch the car that nobody's driving. I mean, that's like a George Carlin like skit,
Yeah.
right? That's like a stand-up comedy. Like I developed a car that nobody has to drive, but I have to put somebody in it to watch them drive it. It's like, it's like a Lenny Bruce. For all of you youngsters, that was a comedian way back when. But you know what I mean? It's just there's absurdities, and unfortunately, fame and notoriety have done this to our business. Come on, when you were growing up, you're not an old guy, but you had to be young enough. Your parents took you to a neighborhood restaurant that they went to all the time. We tried to develop that here in New York. There's these guys, young guys here, Duro and another Greg Katz. They're developing these local restaurants for people, right? And they're getting crushed by you're not getting crushed, but they have to compete against these mammoth things that people bring here for no purpose. And it's the real estate people's fault because they want to develop these neighborhoods, and they think that a restaurant is the way to do it. It's I just don't. You can't control it. You can have an opinion about it that doesn't really matter because you're not going to stop the train from running down the tracks. You got to come up with your own. These days, you got to be craftier than ever, and you got to have your own plan, whether you have a brand or not, because there's so much competition. There's a lot of fish in the pool, and real estate is really making it hard to be an entrepreneur.
So it sounds like your answer in terms of like how technology matters is it kind of just has to work and do the thing you need it to do and make it get out of the way otherwise, right?
I think other than inventory and purchasing and point of sale, it doesn't do shit for us. I mean, what do you can't put a robot in the kitchen. You can't put,
Yeah.
like, you, what I want, even all of these turbo chef ovens, these programmed up, chefs don't use those pre-programmed things. They make up their own programs.
Yeah.
It's like, it's all for the consumer. Anytime you see a gadget like that, they want a professional to use it so the consumer buys it. But if you put it in the professional environment, it'll break in 5 minutes. Like, I don't buy anything digital. So see, there's your perfect example. Like old technology. You see, the Colby oven is genius, but the digital panel that you have to replace because of the steam and the heat that destroys it,
Right.
they fixed that problem. But on convection ovens, that still exists. If you buy these LED things, after a while, the heat just blows the thing out. It just have it. Why do it's even this? Do you really need your phone with you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? Do you need to touch it first thing in the morning? Do you need to show everybody what you're having for breakfast or one of the greatest moments of your life? Or are you better off keeping it to yourself and every once in a while just leaking some of that out there? Because trust me, if I didn't have to do this for my career, I would take my cell phone and social media and throw it in the Atlantic Ocean and then unfold a chair and sit there and watch the ocean while all that shit just floated by.
Oh, that sounds so nice. Oh my gosh.
Because we're being fooled. This is the biggest con of all time, this shit. Because tell me that social media or technology on the minimal level is doing anything for us except replacing middle management jobs and receptionists who, I used to like to talk to. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
the customer service, or we're talking to somebody in Bangladesh now, God bless him, but my bank's down the corner. Why am I talking to a guy in Bangladesh about the balance? That's just the way the world is. I mean, we've lost our direction, but I can't do anything about it. So I'm going to shrink my world to a place where I can have some kind of control over it, or at least some oversight of it. That's why I want to own my own restaurant rather than license it. That's why I don't really chase television or notoriety anymore, because I think I've achieved enough in those areas that it's better off left alone for me. There's plenty of people who really enjoy that and are good at it, want to do it. I don't begrudge it. It's not for me. It doesn't fit into my life anymore. And I just want to serve good food and be known as a great chef and restaurateur. I mean, I've spent 50 years doing it. What about, I'm not going to change my fucking career now.
Ah, John, you set me up for the best last question ever then by that, because truly, like, you're going on. I just love your stream of consciousness and all this kind of stuff. And you've said publicly things like, stay humble, think everything through, work your ass off, and appreciate others. Right? It's, I guess, like 50 years, right, in this industry, from a kid working in a Hamptons pub to a Michelin star chef who's had TV shows, competed on like Extreme Chef, Top Chef, all the stuff. Like, you have done it all. And if you could go back and have a conversation with yourself right before you opened Knife in 2014, or even further back when you were just starting out as a chef, and think about the people who might be listening who are in those same places, who look at you and say, how can I be him? What's the one thing you tell yourself about building a restaurant brand that you had to learn the hard way, so that that next generation can really benefit from that?
I'm going to make you laugh. It's like, first of all, make sure you have a little bit more money and don't do drugs. That would be the
I mean,
first.
let's
Don't do
just we
drugs in the
start
80s
there.
when everybody else was. It was hard to stop. No, but it's serious. Make sure you have a little bit more money than you think, and don't do drugs. That's a good start. But I would just think that I would be uh, less afraid of asking for help when things were difficult for me to understand, rather than thinking I had to do it all on my own. And that comes more from my family. My dad checked out on me he became an alcoholic when he was 62, and he was a banker. So like, I was relying on that, and it got taken away from me. So that's a personal journey, but that's where I was at the time. And that's why I would go back and just want to have somebody else who's a little bit more, just realistic and honest about like how much money I could make, what I should be doing with it, type of lifestyle I should be living, because I kind of raised myself since I was 17 years old. So I had that adversity. It was great freedom. It led me to be able to work in restaurants and travel around and sleep on floors and do all this shit that you can't really do anymore. But at the same time, there were pieces missing that affected my career later on. I mean, look at me now. This shit happened to me 15 years ago. I did it to myself. I slowed down my career. So that's the honesty, is that, you learn from falling down, but you don't want to fall down as many times as I have, and I haven't fallen down that many times. It's just that, you know, even in my cookbook, I'm paraphrasing myself, but actually Jordan McKay, he wrote the book, but he took every
Sure,
word.
I got it. But you said yes.
Mistakes happen in the blink of an eye, but the
Mm.
recovery from those mistakes can take a long time, or they can take forever. And then you add the psychological aspect that human beings are the only animal on this planet that punish themselves over and over again for the same mistake because of our consciousness. And if you have a conscience, so you first have to learn how to, the best way to free yourself is learn the lesson. Because if you don't learn the lesson, you're never going to be able to forgive yourself for making a mistake. And that's the greatest advice I can give to everybody. And I struggle with that every day. Like, I can look at all of my accolades and I can look at all of my success, but then I look at my children and people go like, "Oh man, you should write a book about your life and tell all these stories." I said, "Nah, I don't want my kids reading stories about the 80s in New York City. Let them figure that out for themselves. It's like, I'm not that important enough that I need to expose that part of my life." I just think I've been humbled by my own success and my own mistakes that have come together to want a life. At this point, I just want good restaurants. I want my kids to be healthy. I want a great relationship, and I want to be able to pay for it all. I don't know. I don't think what else matters. Someone's
I
gonna
love
watch.
that.
Someone's gonna watch guys' grocery games 10 years from now and say, "Hey, there's John Tesar." No, no, they're not. They're not going to do that. And if they do, there's something fucking wrong with them. Anyway, so I'll leave you with that.
That is exactly where I wanna leave it. I think that's some serious stage advice. I mean, just so vulnerable and so
No
real. I think
tattoos. No tattoos. Only scars, baby. Only real scars.
no tattoos, only scars. I have loved this conversation. I find it just refreshingly honest, and I'm I'm just thankful that we get to share this with folks, that they get to hear your perspective. And I appreciate you taking the time to do this because you didn't have to. And so I really do appreciate your wisdom.
And can I say just one last thing relative to what's going on in the restaurant world? And a few chefs have really made some really beautiful, poignant points on Instagram recently about the whole Noma thing and I don't have any opinion about Noma. It's none of my business. I wasn't there. I didn't work there. I've never eaten there. I don't know chef. I know what it's about and on the whole 9 yards, but I just think in general in kitchens, we have a tendency to allow people into our kitchens who have passion and desire, but they may not be emotionally developed enough to handle the intensity of what someone at a certain level does.
Mm,
And they misinterpret due to their inability to grow or to learn to progress as a human being. I'm not saying everybody, but I've been a victim of this myself. You have a perfect person, they pass the interview, they're great, right? And some people will call them names that they're soft and all these. It's just who they are. So you have to be careful who you let into your kitchen and you have to have conversations with them to be honest about how you run your kitchen, let them take a look at it, and once you agree to become part of the cult, you shouldn't complain about the cult. Things about pay. I don't condone stabbing or personal physical attacks or any of that, or even verbal abuse anymore. First, anything personal, it's inexcusable, because we've all taken that oath to change.
yeah.
We've agreed that that's the standard now. Right. But you can't go retroactively back 5 years and say, oh, John Tesar called me an asshole. I should lose my job today because I hurt your feelings 10 years ago. Right. Do we want to live in that type of world? Do we want to just start taking people out because they weren't mature enough to handle the situation they were involved in, yet everybody else benefited from it financially, emotionally, educationally, pushing the envelope, you know? I mean, it's not for me to judge. And I'm not judging and I'm not making excuses or condoning any, negative or violent behavior. But people have to take a look at the bigger picture before they start. Then your sponsors cancel you, everybody goes away, money dries up. Right. Where did all that talent go? Where did all that history go? Where did all those trips and cookbooks and everybody idolizing going to Copenhagen?
Mhm.
Right. Just got flushed down the toilet by somebody who didn't like the way chef talked to them. I don't know the story.
Yeah.
But I've seen that happen on a lesser scale for that very thing. Someone said the wrong thing to somebody and they brought the whole organization down. And I'm not talking about sexual harassment or anything like that. I mean, just interaction of like being sensitive in a kitchen and bringing the quality, bringing the culture, bringing the business to a halt because of your sensitivities is not for the restaurant business. I'm sorry. You should choose another profession.
Interesting. I mean, it's good advice. I think it again speaks to the importance of like good mentorship, good examples, like making sure you're going through that and then, constantly reevaluating the people who are there. And yeah, you're right. It is a hard industry. It's a tough industry that is emotionally taxing and draining. And I think that, there is some acknowledgement that people need to start to have, grace with themselves and with each other as they interact with others. So, appreciate your feedback there for sure.
Maturity and mutual respect go a long way these days in the restaurant business. I think even if somebody's not right for the job or they don't have the talent that you expect, if you have some kind of mutual respect for them as a human being, you could tell them honestly how you feel, and they should be
Yeah.
able to receive it. And if they can't receive it, you shouldn't take it personally and they should just move on. That was my point.
Yeah.
So
And that's the only way we grow, both for the people that we're mentoring and for ourselves. John Caesar, thank you so much for this conversation. I've loved just getting to chat with you. This is like just a refreshing fucking ice water. I just like gonna like drench myself in.
anytime, my friend, anytime.
We got to keep this going. Obviously, you and I could probably talk for hours, so we will do this again.
Not forever, but I still have a couple of decades to talk about it.
Yeah, you got it. It's a date. John Caesar, thank you so much for joining us.
Take care, man. Thank you.
Restaurant Reset is sponsored by Genius for Restaurants, the modern point-of-sale system from Global Payments. Genius helps you reach your most important goals, whether that's simplifying your operations, speeding up your checkouts and table turns, easily expanding into new locations, or building loyalty with guests. To find out more, visit globalpayments.com/genius.